this is a time to be bold.
It comes from China.
Coronavirus pandemic alert, UK and Italy hit.
A time of disruption in the life of our country.
We will beat the coronavirus, and we will beat it together.
Through the radio, we can all talk to each other and maybe help each other out.
I want to thank Isle of Wight radio listeners for how much they've engaged with this.
It is time to join the nation to clap for our carers.
It's a bit mad, man. Like, you have up days, down days, all of the in between. Of course, you know that you can rely on us. National treasure, Colonel Tom Moore. Good morning, Colonel Tom.
Good morning, Dave.
It's Harry Styles, everyone.
Yeah.
Hello. Harry, where in the world are you, mate?
I'm actually in California.
You're self-isolating over there.
I got stuck.
The world's biggest radio rave, Kiss Fest.
Will you be cutting your own hair, First Minister?
I'm not letting Peter anywhere near my hair.
The dog is literally eating through her wires. That's
Take your right hand, take your left hand, sprinkle on some water while you do the hand dance.
Some musical inspiration during the lockdown.
You are a key worker, your girlfriend is a key worker. I'm opening number 10.
Oh, make me a millionaire!
Tommy!
No way!
Absolute Radio 40.
I'm Professor Green, bringing you help and advice during the coronavirus pandemic.
60-second support.
If you're struggling, it's important to talk about it.
So right now, let's join together across the UK and reach out to someone.
Welcome to Tuning In Travel. Thanks for joining us for a packed hour where we'll be hearing from a wide range of speakers with sessions from former Marketing and Customer Experience Director of TUI, Jeremy Ellis, Hits Breakfast presenter Fleur East, in conversation with Paul Gerard, Global's Creative Director Jo McCrostie, and Radiocentre's Siobhan Kenny, Mark Barber, Judith Spilsbury and Camilla Camara. But our first session is from Lucy Barrett. As Radiocentre's client director, Lucy champions the value and impact of commercial radio amongst advertisers and agencies. Her mission is to help advertisers see radio differently. Today, Lucy will provide an overview of the radio industry.
Good morning and welcome to Tuning In Travel. My name's Lucy and I'm the client director here at Radiocentre. So we know that the travel industry has dealt with all sorts of huge impacts before, from September the 11th to the ash cloud crisis back in 2010, but you've never dealt with anything like the scale which you're dealing with the COVID-19 crisis. We also know that there's very mixed reviews from customers about how they'll return to travel. There are those that simply can't wait to book, and as soon as that you have allowed booking to happen again, have immediately booked, to those who are being more cautious and actually don't want to travel in the immediate to mid-term future. And in between, there's a whole load of people who you'll be wanting to help make the right decisions that are right for them. Rebuilding trust and reminding customers that you're there when they're ready to book must be a high priority. Even more so in 2021, as some stability will return and, there will be a new normal and people will want to go out and see the world again. And we'll be showing you this morning how radio can help with the key messages and help regain trust in your sector. So this morning, I will be taking you through some Radiocentre research, a little bit about radio listening, both before and during lockdown, and have a look at how we compare to some of the other mediums, before I hand you over to Jeremy Ellis, the former Marketing Director of TUI, who's going to give you a very in-depth look at what is happening in the travel market, what he thinks is going to happen in the immediate future and in the long-term future. So firstly, more so now than ever before, radio and audio is relevant. So from podcast to streaming to voice recognition services, audio is such a core part of our lives. And that's true for radio too. But what distinguishes radio from any other audio medium is the intimate relationship that listeners have with it, which is probably why 90% or just under 90% of UK adults tune in to radio every week. And 36 million of them are commercial radio listeners who listen on average for 13 hours each week. Now, when I think of all the disruption that's happened over the last decade, I can't think of another medium that's probably better for us to stack up against than social media. It's caused so much disruption. But as this chart shows you, time spent with radio is still significantly higher than that spent with social media. So what's the most basic accomplishment you'd expect from your advertising campaign? Well, we would argue that it's being noticed, but there are many mediums that can't even guarantee that. With the trend towards subscription video on demand and the rise of ad blockers, research has revealed that only 12% of viewable ads are noticed. But when it comes to radio, you can't skip or block or click away a radio ad. And as I've already said, commercial radio engages 36 million real followers each week. And it offers a regulated and safe environment which is deeply trusted by listeners, and more so than any other medium. But don't just take my word for it. When it comes to trust, there's a lot of research out there. But this one here is the Eurobarometer survey done every year by the European Commission. And as you'll see, radio has come out as the most trusted medium across Europe. Now, this wasn't just this year, actually. Since this survey began, which is 10 years, radio has come out. So it's the most trusted medium for a decade. And when you think about all the disruption in the market over that decade, it's actually something that we're rightly very proud of. So when we look at the total overall audio market and what happens there, this chart, which I've taken radio out for the time being, will show you what's going on. So the top two, the grey and the green, is the owned music, so CDs, vinyls, digital tracks, so iTunes, that kind of stuff. And then the black is podcasts, and the yellow is on-demand music services. And you will see over the last very few years that there has been a real fight going on, and on-demand music services are squeezing owned music, which shows actually that as consumers, we're increasingly happier to stream music than own our own music collection. But what happens when I add back in commercial radio? Well, as you will see, live radio continues to perform very strongly, and actually I would use the word dominate listening. Another thing we're often being asked about is about younger listeners. There is a misconception that radio only attracts older audiences, and actually those coming up through the ranks, the younger listeners, don't listen to radio, they don't want their music created by somebody else, they just stream and listen to podcasts. Well, as this chart shows you, that couldn't be further from the truth. The bottom two lines are podcasts, and the blue line on the bottom is free music streaming services. So this is the music streaming services that carry ads, and you will see that they both have just under a 20% reach of that audience. The top line, the pink line, is commercial radio, which has a weekly reach of 66% of the 15 to 24-year-old market. So what's been happening during lockdown to listening? We went out and spoke to commercial radio listeners, and we discovered that 38% of commercial radio listeners had actually increased their listening. And who were they? Well, they were people like you and I, so 45% increase from the newly working from home. So this is people like you and I who had been used to going into the office every day, who suddenly found themselves at the kitchen table or the spare room, working from home, and who put the radio on, not only for company, but for connection to the outside world, very important for the news, and also for the serendipity of hearing a great song that I hadn't heard in a while. And actually that was the same for the newly working from home. So these are people that were perhaps newly at home. And this is perhaps people who'd been furloughed or for whatever reason who were normally out and about were at home. And 43% of them increased their listening. And even our key workers, so the people that kept this country going, the hospital workers, the delivery drivers, the supermarket workers, the travel workers, 32% of them increased their radio listening, which goes to show just what an important need state radio serves. It is that connection to the outside world, and it is that connection to what that want to keep informed, but also it keeps you company, something that other audio just doesn't quite match. And our research was backed up from research by Global and Bauer, who could monitor streaming and see what an increase of listening there was. And they discovered that there'd been a surge of online listening of 15%, and for some of their stations, very much higher. And actually, since the peak, now things are beginning to, and we are beginning to feel a bit more of a return to normality. Those figures have still stayed up above 10% than pre-lockdown, which would suggest that the newly working from home, the office workers, have stayed with us. So YouGov data highlights how people's mood is changing. So as the restrictions are being lifted, as life is returning to normal, what's been happening? Well, it's very hard to read this chart, but you can go online and look up the YouGov weekly mood tracker, and you'll be able to see at the end that the top line is happiness, and that is now above frustration, boredom and stress. Which kind of shows that people are itching to get out. They want to start behaving normally again. And perhaps these further changes in lockdown and the opening up of the skies and all of those things is going to unlock some pent-up consumer demand. So we thought we'd take a look at this pent-up consumer demand, and we did some Radiocentre research called Bounce Back and Beyond. And this is available on our website. And it explored this pent-up demand by sector, and unsurprisingly, social activities and travel topped the list of the things people were most looking forward to spending their money on. The activities that are most impacted by lockdown, really. Now, a small caveat: we were out in field with this back in May when things were different, but what we did discover was that when it came to what people were really going to spend their money on versus lockdown. And the pattern did change. So despite restaurants, bars and clubs and international scoring highly on that last chart, we could see a slightly more pragmatic approach and domestic travel did dominate. So just a quick caveat on that one. So the good news is that bounce back research also highlighted the important role that radio advertising can play in influencing these decisions. So bearing in mind that most people do not believe that they are that influenced by advertising, these scores are really impressive. So to summarise, we're moving now into this, what is expected to be a brief bounce back. It hasn't been as much of a bounce as the economists had hoped for, but people are beginning to enjoy the opportunity to unleash some of their pent-up demand, to travel again, to shop again, to go to the hairdressers again, and to discover some of the stuff that they've been missing. And radio can play a very important role in helping them make those decisions, and it can also make a very important role in helping you regain trust amongst your customers. So I'm going to pop back at the end to say goodbye, but in the meantime, I'm now handing you over to Jeremy Ellis.
You can get involved in today's event by posting your questions using the hashtag #TuningIn or tweeting @Radiocentre. On the way, we have sessions from Global's Creative Director Jo McCrostie and Radiocentre's Planning Director Mark Barber. But our next session is from Jeremy Ellis, who spent 6 years as Marketing and Customer Experience Director for TUI UK and Ireland, leading a team of over 200 marketeers. Over a 27-year career at TUI, Jeremy rose to Executive Board Director and was the architect of several of the organisation's successful initiatives, including the Thompson to TUI brand migration. Jeremy now works as an independent marketing consultant, working with a range of clients across various sectors.
Hi, my name is Jeremy Ellis and I'm the former Marketing Director of TUI UK and Ireland. I'm now an independent marketing and strategy consultant. I've been asked today to give you an overview of the coronavirus and how that's affected the travel industry, looking at the immediate impacts of COVID-19, how the travel industry is coping with the change, what the challenges and opportunities ahead are, and the potential future trends. And critically, what do brands need to consider to rebuild their business and critically trust with their consumers? I thought it would be useful to have a look at some of the general travel trends running up to pre-COVID-19. I'm not going to show you any fancy line charts because essentially they grow steadily and then just fall off a cliff as soon as the pandemic hits. Everything came to a standstill. But before that, travel overseas was growing around 2 to 3% every year. And that was driven by a number of factors. Firstly, there's more disposable income, particularly in the over 45s market who have the time and the money to travel. The world is also easier to get around. The low-cost airlines have really opened up many different destinations that you wouldn't have been able to access before. And that's meant that people can go and see places that they've not been able to. And in addition, business has become more international. So brands now are typically more global, and therefore people need to travel more to do their work. And obviously the low-cost airlines have made that easier too. Another trend is that people's lives have just become really busy. And I think now people put more importance on downtime and holiday time, that they want to spend quality time with their families. And in addition to that, people are looking for more experiences these days over material things. People tend to own all the things they really need, and typically experiences come very high on the list. I want to go and see the world. I want to do something that's always been on my bucket list. So these things have really driven travel over several years. I think the immediate impact of COVID falls into 4 different areas. I mean, it goes without saying that the travel industry is used to major disruption, but not on this scale. And I think it falls into 4 different areas, the impact. So the first one being financial, the second one being operational, so how do things need to change to cope as people travel. The third one is how people feel about travelling with this pandemic, so what's the customer sentiment like? And the fourth one is travel in the new emerging world, so how is the environment and the world changing as a result of the pandemic? And I'll cover each of these 4 areas in turn. So looking at financial impact, well, the immediate issue has obviously been for cash flow. Travel business are typically cash flow positive, so travel is booked primarily in advance, money's taken, and the cost of it is covered later on. However, with such massive cancellations, there's been a huge demand for customer refunds. And initially, that was completely overlooked. Obviously, businesses want to protect their cash flow model, and therefore those refunds weren't paid straight away. And what's happening now as a result is that obviously businesses are having to cope with effectively processing all of those refunds, and clearly that's having a massive impact on their cash flow and also on their capability to process it, because they're just not used to delivering so many refunds. I think as well, businesses are having to cope with the scaling back of their future plans. Clearly the demand isn't going to be there in the short term, and therefore they have to plan accordingly. I think also there's the kind of opposite side, which is how do we maximise future bookings in order to protect cash flow? So inevitably there's going to be a drive to bring in those bookings for the future. The challenges ahead really are around managing the closure of government schemes in terms of furloughing, and also the whole consolidation of the industry. Sadly, we've already seen some fallout from the industry. There will be further redundancies, no doubt, which is very, very sad to see. But nonetheless, there has to be the right sizing of businesses and the industry moving forwards. And that, again, will have a massive financial impact. When you look at the operational impact, clearly the immediate issue is just shutting down the entire travel industry. And I think what that's led to is a real logistical headache about how you get things restarted. So, airlines, cruise lines, hotels, train companies, just getting the whole thing back up and running in a manageable way is clearly a huge task. Not only is it about starting up, it's also about starting up in a completely different environment where everything has to be completely safe to avoid any further outbreaks. In addition to that, there's been a lack really of clear government guidelines. So with airlines in particular, there's been talk about air bridges, various other openings up of destinations, when they're going to open up, is it safe to go? So there's a huge logistical issue around what's actually possible, in addition to actually creating the operation itself. I think some of the challenges ahead from an operational point of view is around making sure that there's flexibility planned into the future programmes to cope with any further outbreaks. I also think it's vital, and I'm pleased to see that many businesses are doing this, is providing insurance to cover for COVID-19. Customers just wouldn't travel if that insurance wasn't in place. And I think brands really need to learn from the operation experience as things start to kick back up again, to make sure that as numbers increase, those safety measures can still remain in place. When you look at the impact from a customer point of view, the immediate impact was clear. There was a huge fear of travel. Some of the statistics talked around 2/3 of people wouldn't want to travel on public transport. Same number of people wouldn't want to go to airports or get on a plane. And so obviously there was a big issue around whether people would even travel at all. In addition to that, I think there was an immediate impact on customer confidence. Because of the lack of communications from brands around refunds, consumers just couldn't get hold of anyone in airlines or cruise lines or holiday companies to be able to ask about their refunds. And I think that's really sort of brought down consumer confidence in the short term. What businesses are having to cope with now is really mixed feelings over whether people want to travel or not. And it's really clear that they want that reassurance that it's safe to travel, and that insurance to cover for COVID-19 is vital. I've no doubt, though, in the medium to long term, that demand still remains. The challenges ahead from a customer perspective is making sure that lessons are learned from the refund debacle, and that's not repeated. It's also about reassuring customers that it's safe to travel. And no doubt there's likely to be more demand for shorter haul destinations, and particularly for UK holidays and staycations. And the main challenge ahead, I think, is all about rebuilding trust, getting consumers to believe that your brand cares about them and is safe to travel with. Finally, the effect on the wider world, I think, falls into a couple of areas. Firstly, the experience in the actual destination that you go to is going to have changed, certainly in the short term, where it's all going to be more subject to rigorous controls and health checks. And in the longer term, I think the fact that we now do business in a different way, we're now doing meetings virtually, we're visiting friends and family virtually, no doubt that some travel will decrease as a result, particularly around business travel. And also, I think that people have recognised that without planes in the sky, with less cars travelling around, less planes and less cruise ships, it has had a positive impact on the environment. And I think that message will really stick. And I think brands are going to have to think very carefully about what they do in terms of protecting the environment moving forwards. So thinking about future trends, it's very fair to say that travel is used to major disruption, and so are consumers as a result. There have been terrorism attacks, there have been volcanoes erupting, hurricanes, numerous ways in which travel has been disrupted over the years, but absolutely not on this scale. But consumers are used to it. No doubt demand for travel and these new experiences will remain high. Travel is one of the last things to disappear off customers' lists when money gets tight, and holidays will always remain a high priority. I think it's fair to say, though, that in the future customers are going to be more cautious. They're going to want tighter insurance cover to make sure that if there's any further outbreak, they're covered. I think they're going to have to become accustomed to safety checks and health checks, but I think that will become the norm and they'll be happy with that. And I assume that in the short to mid-term, people will want to travel closer to home, which will be a more positive bias towards short haul and certainly to holidays in the UK. I think it's also fair to say as well that there's been an acceleration in booking online. People now have had to stay at home, they're more used to using technology, and inevitably more bookings will be made via their phones and by their laptops, etc. And that will be a trend moving forwards now as people are more used to it. I think there will be less business travel because people are more used to doing things virtually and working from home. And also, as I mentioned earlier, there's this consciousness of what's happened with the environment. And therefore people will take that into consideration before actually jumping on a plane for a meeting. So what do brands need to consider moving forwards? Well, I think the biggest job is all about rebuilding trust. It's about reassuring customers in these key uncertain times. And that comes in two forms. The first one is in the delivery. So brands must make sure that when people are travelling with them, all of the right operational elements are in place to make it safe, that there's insurance in place to make people feel confident that they can travel, and if things go wrong, then they're protected. And in addition to that, it's really important that people are reassured that if things go wrong, they can get their money back. So if they're infected by COVID-19 before they travel, they're not going to lose their money. Those things are really critical in any form of travel, I think, to make brands believable and credible, and to bring back customers. From a communications point of view, I think now is a huge opportunity, actually. I think brands firstly have to be completely open, to be contactable by their customers, and also to be really authentic, not to cover anything up. I think as well, when talking about their brands, it's important to focus on media that deliver emotive messaging. People want to hear reassurance, and it's important that that's delivered in the right way. So media such as TV and radio, I think, will be really important for that moving forwards. I think also it's important to remember that at the moment, media consumption is extremely high. Because people are staying at home, the radio is on all day, TV is on more so, online is obviously being consumed a lot more. So there's never been a period of time when media consumption has been so high. It's therefore a great opportunity for brands to make the most of that from a value point of view. And there's real potential when times are difficult, and this is proven in many years of similar experiences, that brands that invest when times are hard can win share of voice and also win share of market. So there's never really a better time to take this opportunity to reassure customers and potentially take a good share of the market. And I think when you look at the different media, as I've mentioned, TV and radio at the moment, those consumptions are extremely high. And with radio in particular, it's on all day, certainly in my house, and therefore there's an opportunity to talk to people in a much more frequent way with emotive messaging. So I think it's really important that you consider the opportunity of investing in brand communications coming out of the back of this pandemic. Lastly, I think it's also worth saying that brands should really use this time properly to reflect on what's happened. Step back, really consider what's important to your customer, what's important to your business in terms of structuring yourself moving forwards, and how you make sure your purpose is really clear and how that delivers through your brand and through your business. So in some respects, whilst times are really difficult, there is an opportunity for those that are clear on what they need to do and those that are brave to make the most of it. So on that note, thank you very much for listening, and really good luck with all of your challenges ahead. And have a great day. Thank you.
Still to come, we'll be hearing from music artist and breakfast radio presenter Fleur East. And Judith Spilsbury will explore how targeting people at relevant times helps turbocharge ad effectiveness. Before that, our next session comes from Radiocentre's planning director, Mark Barber, who's responsible for developing the industry body's award-winning research. Over the years, Radiocentre has amassed a bank of insight into the impact of radio advertising for brands. Today, Mark will take us through the research that demonstrates how radio can play a vital role in driving business for travel companies when times are tough.
Good morning, everyone. With recession looming over the economy at least until the middle of next year, this presentation explores how radio can help travel companies navigate the tricky road ahead, upgrade their market share, and get sales to really take off. So assuming everyone's on board, I'll move on. Now, I'm sure many of you have already seen one or more of the numerous press articles, blogs or presentations doing the rounds that highlight the importance of continuing to advertise during a recession. Taking it a stage further, Marketing Week columnist Mark Ritson concludes that recessions are as much an opportunity as they are a threat, and believes that the best marketers will be upping, not cutting their budgets. Why is this? Well, recessions create unique conditions that allow smart marketers to disrupt category norms and drive brand growth faster than during normal times. One reason for this is that many brands reduce advertising spend when times are tough, opening the door for competitors to grow market share at their expense. This is because the key behind market growth at any time is something called excess share of voice, achieved by spending proportionately more on advertising media than your share of market. The opposite is also true, incidentally. If you spend proportionally less than your share of market, then your market share declines. IPA analysis demonstrates that if a brand spends consistently ahead of their market position, then over time, their market share grows to match their share of spend. And when your competitors are spending less, it's much easier to boost your excess share of voice. On top of this, recent analysis of the IPA data bank by marketing consultant Peter Field reveals how excess share of voice effects are multiplied in a recession. As you can see from this chart, which compares market share growth at different excess share of voice or ESOV levels during the 08-09 recession, compared to the 2 years either side. Now the column on the right shows that brands that achieved excess share of voice over 8% on average experienced market share growth 67% greater than they would have done during normal times. That's why recessions offer such great opportunity for growing market share. So, how can radio help travel advertisers in this context? Well, firstly, for many categories, a budget spent on radio buys a much higher share of voice within the medium than it does on other media. For example, this chart highlights how a travel advertiser spending £1 million on radio in Q3 last year would have achieved a 6.6% share of voice on radio, over 40% higher than it would buy in the next closest medium, outdoor, and 6 times the share it would afford on TV. And there's further data from the IPA which highlights the role that radio can play in boosting market share growth. This chart shows the efficiency of campaigns that feature radio in converting excess share of voice into annual market share growth, compared to campaigns that don't use the medium. As an illustration of what this means, a 10% excess share of voice on a campaign that includes radio converts into 0.8 percentage points of annual market share growth, compared to only 0.2 percentage points for campaigns that don't feature radio. Summarised more succinctly, this means that if you're using radio as part of your media mix, you'll grow market share 4 times faster than if you're not. Beyond excess share of voice benefits, there's another reason why this particular recession offers even greater opportunities for advertisers to disrupt the category. People's brand purchase habits are deeply ingrained and difficult to shift. However, research from behavioural expert Richard Shotton shows that people who experience significant life events, such as marriage, divorce, changing jobs or moving house, are 2.5 times more likely to try a new brand compared to those that haven't. Well, how is this relevant? Well, lockdown has radically disrupted everybody's lives as much, if not more than, these more typical life events. And as it is relaxed, this research suggests the scale of brand switching will be pretty widespread. The main implication being that your customers are more likely to switch to your competitors, and your competitors' customers are more likely to switch to you. So it's vital that you land on the right side of this equation. How can radio help ensure that you do? Well, firstly, and very simply, radio offers advertisers the best value for money audience delivery. For every £1 you spend on radio, you'll be buying at least twice as much audience as you will in any other medium. Or, for example, up to 15 times as much in the case of online video. That's a pretty big head start when you're looking to influence people as widely as possible with your media plan. Beyond efficiency of audience delivery, radio is proven to boost advertising effects for travel brands when used as part of a wider media mix. Analysis of results from 27 travel campaigns highlights how radio significantly boosts overall campaign cut-through across a range of metrics, including ad awareness, brand relevance, and brand consideration. Now, which travel advertiser wouldn't like awareness of their campaign to be 58% higher? Radio is also a highly responsive medium, perfect for when you need to deliver results quickly, especially online. For companies aiming to drive people to their website, this chart shows how interaction with travel brands online is on average 59% higher among people exposed to radio ads compared to those that aren't. with the best performing campaign experiencing a 163% uplift in brand browsing. These effects are immediate too. Over half of browsing stimulated by radio takes place within 24 hours of exposure to the advertising. Being effective at driving people online means that radio can have a direct effect on ticket sales too, as this case study demonstrates. When British Airways decided to run a tactical leisure promotion during the last recession to stimulate immediate web traffic and sales, they used radio to engage listeners at times when they were most likely to go online and book holidays. Radio helped double awareness of the promotion, but, more importantly, visits to the BA website were 60% higher among those exposed to the radio campaign, with an associated increase in ticket sales. And that leads nicely onto the next point, which is, most crucially for advertisers marketing in a recession, as a result of all of these other effects, radio really delivers on the bottom line. As we can see in this chart, radio delivers higher ROI for travel brands than any other medium, paying back £5.70 in revenue for every £1 spent. This ROI efficiency of radio means that it can have powerful effects on overall campaign returns for travel companies. As this analysis conducted on Radiocentre's campaign ROI calculator demonstrates, total campaign ROI is 13% higher when radio is allocated 20% of a £10 million travel budget compared to when it is not used at all. Now that may not sound like a lot, but based on this data, that's an extra £5.6 million in revenue added to the bottom line, purely as a result of moving money from other media into radio. So, to summarise this brief tour of travel-related radio effectiveness research, firstly, think about how incorporating radio into your campaign can help drive share of voice for your brand and convert that into market share growth 4 times faster than if you're not using the medium. Secondly, with increased likelihood of brand switching over the next few months, consider how radio can help ensure that your brand gains more new users than it loses. When budgets are tight, you need to make sure that every advertising impression has an impact and elicits a positive outcome for your brand. The evidence that we've reviewed shows how when used as part of a wider media mix, radio helps travel campaigns cut through more effectively and has an immediate effect on influencing behaviour, be that in terms of increasing online response or driving ticket sales. Finally, and most vitally when times are tough, radio is proven to boost the bottom line for travel companies. Allocating money to radio from other media can significantly improve revenue returns from a media campaign while remaining within the same budget. Taking all of these points into consideration, it's clear that incorporating radio into the mix can really make a difference in helping travel businesses take off again. Now, if you're interested in finding out more or would like some advice about how radio can play a role for your business, please get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks very much for listening.
Over the last few months, Radiocentre has been working to assist the advertising industry to provide support during these highly challenging times. From new research studies to creative best practice, here's a look at the resources Radiocentre has made available. Over the last few months, Radiocentre has been working to assist its members and the advertising industry to provide support during these highly challenging times. From negotiations with governing bodies, politicians and the public sector to resources for sales teams and media agencies. Radiocentre's Coronavirus Hub is home to multiple tools and resources, including our Radio Bites series, the latest news and best practice creative examples. Radiocentre also commissioned research agency DRG to explore how the coronavirus crisis has changed listening behaviour amongst commercial radio listeners. The study found that 38% of commercial radio listeners are listening to more radio than before lockdown, with audiences tuning in for an average of 26 hours a week, with 90% of listeners saying radio keeps them in touch with the outside world. Still to come, Radiocentre's Camilla Camara will explore the importance of a consistent brand sound. But first, we welcome Judith Spilsbury, Head of Training and Special Projects at Radiocentre. Judith will explore how speaking to people at relevant moments can enhance advertising engagement and memorability.
Hello. So we've heard a lot today about radio's ability to drive really successful results for travel brands. So what I want to do over the next few minutes is provide some additional food for thought on ways of optimising your radio campaign to increase brand saliency and cut through even further. We know that one of radio's strengths is targeting, and indeed in Ubiquitous Re-evaluating Media study, which we published a couple of years ago, radio comes top in terms of its ability to target effectively. And that's because it isn't just able to target by demographic or geography, but as a real-time medium, it also provides an opportunity to target specific times of day and days of the week. So for travel brands, there's already a real opportunity to speak to people at key times when they might be thinking about or planning a trip or a holiday, or even just about to go online to book. To Mark's point earlier, online response to radio advertising can be pretty immediate for travel brands. But what about increasing brand saliency beyond the immediate? Well, here are some thoughts. 9 times out of 10, when we're listening to radio, we're doing something else, whether that's cooking, cleaning, working, mostly at home these days, or even writing this presentation. And that provides us with some opportunities to engage listeners even further. For example, we can use the power of sound to transport the listener's imagination to a world beyond their everyday tasks. So creating the desire to travel. Who doesn't want to escape sometimes, after all? And this is something which I think a lot of travel brands do really, really well. But there's also an opportunity to engage the listener even further by acknowledging the context in which they're listening, so making it more relevant to the moment. So what I want to do is just play you a really simple example to illustrate. Imagine you've just woken up and you're just starting to think about getting ready to go out for a really important meeting, because yes, the world has gone back to normal. And you hear this ad.
I'm wide awake for my busy day ahead. After a great night's sleep in a comfy king-size bed.
Their city hotels are in the best locations. The short hop to my meeting is a revelation.
Great rooms,
big beds,
locations.
This place has it all.
And for such amazing value,
that's Travelogical.
For our lowest prices guaranteed, book direct at travelodge.co.uk.
So does the fact that you're hearing this ad when you're just thinking about getting ready to go out for a meeting increase your connection with it? And more importantly, are you more likely to recall it afterwards? Well, in our Here and Now study, which we published last year, we had participants performing a series of tasks whilst wearing headsets with sensors measuring their brain activity. And we had radio content playing in the background. And we embedded a series of ads into that radio content. And what we found was that when people heard ads in a relevant context, in other words, where the messaging related in some way to the tasks that they were doing, engagement increased by 23%. Now that's probably not surprising, because when things are more relevant to us, we're more likely to engage with them. But also, memory encoding had a similar increase. And what we know is that memory encoding is really important for key decision making and also purchase intent. Also, the more explicit the link between the message and the task, the greater effect. So for 3 of our test ads, we found that the uplifting in engagement was almost 3 times higher than the average, and the uplift in memory encoding was almost twice as high. So what I want to do is just illustrate with an example. So this is the memory encoding trace for one of the ads we tested. It's not from the travel sector, but I think it still makes the point. The axis along the bottom represents time, and the vertical axis is a measure of the depth of memory encoding. And what you'll see is that 2 lines emerge as the ad starts. So the solid red line is the memory encoding when the ad is heard in a relevant context. In this case, the relevant context is exercise. And the dotted red line is when it's heard in a non-relevant context. So let's have a look at what happens.
Currys BC World, colleagues like Ahmed try out our products to give you the best advice.
Oh, I'm exhausted. Now, check my stats on the Apple Watch. Exercise time, 17 minutes.
Call that a run, Dad?
Look, I burnt 200 calories.
Wow.
Achieved an altitude of 2 metres.
Yep, you ran up the front steps.
It all counts.
Our colleagues can give you tried and tested advice and up to £250 off a new Apple product when you trade in your old tech. At Currys PC World, we help you get it right. Terms apply. See currys.co.uk for more details.
So you will hopefully have seen that when exercise is mentioned, the memory encoding increases significantly when heard in a relevant context, so when people are exercising. And that carries right through to the final branding at the end. And the pattern is very different when it's heard in a non-relevant context, so the pattern for the dotted red line. And we also know that increased memory encoding extended beyond the moment. So when we asked participants to complete an exit survey, we found that spontaneous recall of the ads was 60% higher when it was heard in a relevant context. So that's increasing brand saliency over the longer term. So just to conclude very quickly, we know that radio can deliver for travel brands, and we've seen lots of demonstrations of that. One of the reasons why it is such a strong medium is because it's a really effective targeting tool. On 9 out of 10 occasions when we listen to radio, we're doing something else, and that provides travel brands with a further opportunity to enhance the effectiveness of their radio campaign even further, or to optimise their radio campaign. Firstly, because audio can use the power of sound to transport the listener instantly to a world away from those tasks, so creating a desire to travel. But also, there is an opportunity to increase engagement further by acknowledging the listener context in your messaging, so extending brand saliency, both for those who are planning a trip now, but also in the future. I hope you found that useful. More details of Here and Now are available online, and thank you for listening.
If you have a question for Judith, post it using the hashtag #TuningIn or tweeting at Radiocentre. Time to welcome 2018's President of the Cannes Lion Jury for Audio, Global's Creative Director Jo McCrostie. Jo heads up Global's award-winning creative team, and today we'll discuss the speed and flexibility of radio, along with how to strike the right tone during these unusual times.
Good morning, hello. My name is Jo McCrostie and I'm Creative Director at Global. Thank you for joining me today for Tune In. Radio has often been a medium favoured for its flexibility, for its agility, for the speed with which you can go from brief to broadcast. And throughout this period of disruption, I think it has surpassed all expectations in its ability to do that. We were very quick to respond to the crisis, setting up remote studios, and voiceover artists who are much more used to coming into our state-of-the-art Leicester Square studios repurposed bedrooms, basements, bunk beds, sheds, garages, understair cupboards, even airing cupboards apparently, and with the help of as many duvets and pillows as they could find to muffle the sound, they created their own home studios. We've made over 1,000 ads in lockdown. But a key concern for advertisers is how to get the tone right. In our research, we saw that lockdown created a surge in 3 core media need states. These were information and explanation, reassurance and connection, and distraction and escape. So let's take a look at how advertisers have tapped into these need states. And to kick off with, I'm going to share with you as good an example as you can get of this, which is the communication from the government. Here's a montage of some of the messages that we've all heard, sped up a little because there's a lot of them. Have a listen.
This is a message from the government about coronavirus. If you or anyone in your household has a high temperature, do not leave home for at least 7 days. This is a vital update from the government about coronavirus. Coronavirus is a national emergency. Only leave your home for the following reasons. To exercise once a day. Don't go to the GP or hospital. Continue to wash your hands regularly. To help save lives, stay home. Only go outside for food, health reasons, daily exercise, or to work. It's important we all help to protect older people. This is a message from the government to all essential workers. You're doing vital jobs to keep our country going, and you can now get tested for coronavirus. You must remain at home as much as possible.
Mark Strong. Smooth, warm, easy on the ear, but I think the nation will forever remember him as the voice giving us the government's message. And it's authoritative, it's direct, but it's also really clear and calm. So the government's clearly leading in this space, but supermarkets were also really quick to inform shoppers and get their messages out. And this research here from Veritonic, first aired at MediaTel's Future of Audio conference, which was right back in April, shows just how well these ads performed. Really well. Really, really well above industry benchmarks. So people wanted information. They wanted explanation. And banks were all quick to connect and reassure their customers. But there was one issue. They were all saying the same thing, and so all the messages sounded the same. How could any one brand stand out and take ownership of its message? Have a listen to this montage.
With our app and online banking, you can manage your money like you did before, and we're updating our website daily with helpful guides and the latest information on our services.
One of the most convenient ways to do this is to use internet banking. It's both safe and secure. You can check your balance, view your transactions, and move money between bank accounts.
Plus, we've more than doubled the size of our support team. So, if you bank with us and COVID-19 has affected your business, visit our website for more information.
Please be wary of text messages containing links. They may appear to be from legitimate senders like the government, a bank or a delivery company, but never enter your online banking information or personal details after clicking on a link.
From contacting those who are most vulnerable to setting aside £8 billion of lending to support our UK business customers. Because you are not an island, you are part of something far, far bigger.
Now, I deliberately cut the brand names out of those banks, but can you identify any brand in that montage? Normally this is where I'd ask for a show of hands, but because I can't see you, I put this to a panel of 2,377 people, and unprompted, there was one brand that really stood out. It was this one, HSBC. Respondents were able to correctly identify the HSBC ad over all the other competitors in that montage. And what's more, it exceeded category benchmarks for unprompted ad awareness. So even without the brand named in that montage, HSB stood out. And it's differentiated by its music, which was created by Jean-Michel Jarre and has been used since January of last year. So there's HSBC demonstrating a really effective use of brand music. But what about voice? Let's have another listen.
One day, social distancing will be a memory. Flattening curves will be done at the gym, and we'll all be experts in web chatting. Maybe. Until then, HSBC UK is here to help. From contacting those who are most vulnerable to setting aside £8 billion of lending to support our UK business customers.
Okay, you don't need to listen to all of it, but we wondered if we might be able to improve on the brand's connection with listeners if we re-recorded the voice. So same script, same voice, but with a real focus on delivering a much more human connection. This is what it sounded like.
One day, social distancing will be a memory. Flattening curves will be done at the gym, and we'll all be experts in web chatting. Maybe. Until then, HSBC UK is here to help. From contacting those who are most vulnerable to setting aside £8 billion of lending to support our UK business customers.
There's a big difference between addressing an audience and actually connecting with customers. The re-record showed a 19% uplift in relevance, a 10% uplift in likability, and a 7% uplift in authenticity. So this really reinforces the importance of casting and direction, even if the recording's being voiced in a broom cupboard. And now, turning to our final need state, distraction and escape. In times of disruption, when things are unfamiliar, we find comfort in what is familiar. And there's a great opportunity here for brand to remind us why we love them. So this is just an idea, something that we mocked up for one of the nation's favourite brands. We wanted to see if a bit of escape and distraction or light-hearted playfulness might have an impact on brand consideration throughout these uncertain times. Here's the mock-up.
Me, yo, st, pa, st, the, wi, jib, tub, so, s, a, ma, no, I, a, f, yo, a, da, day. Yummy pasta with a juicy tomato sauce and one of your 5 a day.
With an anagram in every mouthful, Heinz Alphabetti Spaghetti is homeschooling in a tin.
Again, we tested this on our panel, and amongst a target audience of children in a household, the ad was seen as significantly more memorable, enjoyable, and relevant. But what's more, we saw a significant uplift in brand consideration for Heinz, which went up to 65%, and a 205% uplift in product consideration. And as the nation's moods and attitudes shift, let's take a closer look at travel and leisure. Our research has shown, unsurprisingly, that travel and leisure are one of the things we're most looking forward to as lockdown lifts. And ABTA have recognised there's a pent-up demand for holidays. The travel purchase journey has changed. We want to go on holiday, but before we seal the deal, we need reassurance. Now, a couple of years ago, we worked with ABTA to create an audio identity for them. This was a suite of music with different versions for different markets and an audio logo that the organisation could use across any platform. Here's a montage. So there was a version for corporate and business. There was a version for families. There was a version for young travellers. And a version for over 50s. Now, before this audio had any exposure, we worked with Neurostrata and Cloud Army, and we tested it against metrics of confidence, expertise, helpfulness, and protection. And the audio scored very highly. In fact, it performed even better than the visual logo, which, as we know, is very well established. Last year, ABTA did some research with Arkenford, and they shared their findings on consumer trust. Respondents were 59% more likely to book their holiday if they saw the ABTA logo. And just as this ABTA badge offers a compelling trust proposition for your customers, the audio badge will help amplify this trust. So if you're an ABTA member, maybe talk to them about using it. As we emerge out of lockdown, our moods and attitudes will continue to change. And it's radio's ability to address the needs of the nation in a tone that reflects the mood of the nation that has been driving success for our advertisers. As Siobhan Kenny says, these need states also help explain the continued resilience of radio listening across a decade of intensifying competition. So radio is tried and tested by our top spending advertisers, and it's now producing some extraordinary and unmatched successes for new advertisers. So radio is proving now more than ever to be an infallible medium. I'm out of time now, so thank you very much for listening, and if you do have any questions, please get in touch. Thank you.
We now welcome Radiocentre's CEO, Siobhan Kenny. Prior to joining Radiocentre, Siobhan played a key role in bringing the 2012 Olympics to London, along with positions at Number 10, Disney and HarperCollins. Today, she'll be discussing how radio has been a force for good.
Hello, my name's Siobhan Kenny and I'm the Chief Executive of Radiocentre. I know we've all had to learn new skills during this lockdown period, and my challenge is that I'd be much more comfortable doing this presentation walking around, so I'll have to let you be the judge of how much I've learnt a new skill at the end of this presentation. We wanted to look at the role of commercial radio during a crisis, bearing in mind that crises don't come much bigger than the current pandemic that we find ourselves in. And our report is entitled Commercial Radio, a Force for Good. So I guess that gives you a little bit of a hint of what the findings were. So we know that people are listening to commercial radio for nearly 2 hours extra a day since we went into lockdown at the end of March. I guess there's an obvious desire to hear more news, and let's look a little bit under the surface of that. We discovered that there are 25% more news bulletins on commercial radio, and that on average they're running for 28% longer. This is interesting, bearing in mind that at this point, Ofcom have in fact relaxed some of their regulation about local news provision. But of course, commercial radio is responding to their listeners. It's also a very nimble medium, so we were able to broadcast from all sorts of interesting and fascinating places, as you've probably picked up. People were broadcasting from garden sheds, from airing cupboards, and basically listeners kind of entered into that as well, echoing their own experience, I guess. And here we find that 77% of people say that radio is the most trusted medium for news, closely followed by television, and then on a sliding scale, really, down to 15%. Only 15% of people who say they trust the news that they consume on social media. So in parenthesis, that's also an interesting point for government and regulators, since of that list, radio and television are pretty heavily regulated, and then we're on a sliding scale downwards. So there is a relationship there, which I think is interesting for us to ponder as a society, really. Of course, the attributes of people listening for longer and also trusting what they hear is not lost on the government. The simple message at the beginning was stay at home, save lives, was very consistent across all media. It's becoming more complicated now as we come out of lockdown, and the message has become slightly more nuanced and maybe even change from region to region. And again, radio is a perfect medium to be talking both to mass audiences, but also to different and harder to reach demographics. Again, a point that isn't lost on government. So we serve very diverse audiences. We score very well, as you see here, with BAME audiences and C2s, Ds and Es. So it's something to consider when you're planning campaigns. And if you're wanting to reach out to a broader audience, some of whom don't really consume much other news apart from what they hear on the radio, then, you know, there's a place there definitely should be a place for radio in your schedules. Of course, just being radio, being commercial radio, a big part of what we do is always focused around charity, around community support, about just being part of the local communities that we serve. We would be nothing without that. So even in a normal year, up to £30 million is raised every year for charitable causes, led, of course, by Global with Make Some Noise and by Bauer with Cash for Kids. But those efforts are replicated across the country as people have all sorts of inventive and often highly amusing ways of raising money for charity, as well as supporting other causes. And so during the pandemic, those efforts have been stepped up. Global and Bauer between them have raised well over £2 million for immediate support for victims of the pandemic and their families. And again, the report highlights how smaller companies, smaller stations across the country are replicating those initiatives. So here are a few examples of things that have gone on more than usual, business as usual, during these last few strange months. Obviously, we did the third ever Mental Health Minute, third year in a row. This year broadcast over 500 stations, including all of the BBC, all of commercial radio, community radio, hospital, prison. It really was a fantastic event and much needed, of course, during this time when people find themselves very constricted in their movements. And therefore, it's a good way to highlight that issue at present. Obviously, we were well behind supporting key workers. Here's our clap for carers. And of course, Colonel Tom. It started off as Captain Tom and is now, of course, the fabulous Colonel Tom. And our own Young Audio Awards highlighting talent for the future. So these are awards for under 18s, second year we run them. One of our first events to be run, in fact, as a virtual event. And we had over 1,000 under 18s tuning into that. So we were really pleased to be nurturing the diversity of our industry, which is something that we're very passionate about at Radiocentre. So finally, I suppose we wanted to just search a bit more about the reasons that people are drawn to commercial radio, and this list kind of gives us a very good indicator of, you know, why people are listening for longer during this time. Keeps me in touch with the outside world, keeps me informed, keeps me company, makes me feel happy, and it delivers trusted news. So I don't know about you, but if someone used even only 2 or 3 of those descriptions about me as a person, I'd feel quite happy with that, I must say. And again, it's one of the reasons why we think that commercial radio is such a good environment for brands. It's trusted, it keeps people company, it makes them happy. So that's a good environment for your brand to be in. And of course, it is unblockable and unskippable, your ads will be. So those are just some of the findings from our report, Commercial Radio, A Force for Good. Of course, you'll find the whole report on our website. And if you've got any further questions, You know where we are. We'd love to hear from you.
Our next session comes from music artist and radio presenter Fleur East, in discussion with Hits Radio's programme director Paul Gerard. Fleur will discuss how radio and brands can work together to deliver effective branded content.
Hello and welcome to Fleur East, who over the last few months has been presenting her brand new breakfast show, Hits Radio Breakfast, from her home in lockdown, but as well as that has been doing countless TV appearances on shows such as Lorraine, The One Show to name a few, releasing brand new music and even gate-crashing people's Zoom meetings whilst they're at home. Hi Fleur East.
Hi!
How are you getting on in lockdown then?
Lockdown has been a life changer for so many different reasons. I couldn't comprehend doing a breakfast radio show from home in lockdown, but with amazing technology and an incredible team, we've managed to broadcast every single morning. And it's been so much fun. I've actually enjoyed being able to do a breakfast show in my pajamas, to be honest.
And I think the beauty of it is, I mean, you're doing your show from 5 different locations in a morning, but it's been great for listeners to get an insight into what I guess is just real life, really, in a normal household.
Yeah, I think it's been very relatable, particularly during this pandemic and in lockdown, because we've been working from home as well as so many others around the UK. So having them listen to us broadcast, and we set the scene that we're in our pajamas and we're broadcasting from our living rooms or our bedrooms or wherever we are, has definitely given it that authentic feel, and we've been able to connect with our listeners on a completely different level.
I think what also makes radio really special is just how trusted it is. You know, you can be there in the darkest of times, and boy, don't we know these last few months have thrown some real curveballs at the way we've lived our lives. And I think hearing you guys go through that has, you know, comforted people in a really special way. I mean, how do you feel like you've had to adapt over these last few months?
I think we've become even more authentic during lockdown because, you know, you can't fight the situation that every single person is in. So it's a unique situation affecting the whole world. And we've been able to just be real about it, be true about our experiences, even from our first experience of going to the shop, or the first time we saw someone wearing a face mask, or getting on our first Zoom with our family. And I remember actually we got a phone call from a florist during lockdown. This particular lady was preparing bouquets and flower arrangements for funerals during lockdown. And she was so upset and deeply emotional about her situation. But she called us up and told us that she was listening to us every day. And she was actually preparing the flower arrangements. And she was close to tears, actually talking about her day-to-day activities and how it affected her. But she said that we were the light in her day, and we actually helped lift her spirits and helped her get through it. And to hear something like that, and to have such an emotional connection with someone like that closely and that intimately, was really special.
And I think we found more and more people turning to radio for that, really, as an escapism from what's going on. But I think something that you've done an incredible job with more recently is actually using your platform to help change things for the better as well, and tackling issues that, you know, perhaps other media would shy away from. I think radio is very good at talking to an audience in so many different ways, whether it be making them laugh, making them cry, but also to re-educate them. And I think the work you did around Black Lives Matters is so important in that. Do you want to tell us a bit about how that came about?
So we have our feature Rap Roulette every Friday, where I get challenged to write a rap on a topic selected at random, and I'm given 24 hours to write the rap. Now, we've covered a range of topics, from the most silly things to quite serious topics. So we went from doing a rap on the British Bake Off and getting Paul Hollywood to come on the show, to then rapping about something really serious and very important, like Black Lives Matter. The raps tend to be quite lighthearted to lift everyone's mood,
But what I found really special was that we could use that feature to tackle really important issues, such as this. And it actually went on to have quite a major impact. It's probably one of the most engaging pieces of content we've put out as a breakfast show.
I think we often say that radio was the original social media because it just creates a conversation, whether that be a conversation when somebody's scrolling through their phone, whilst they're listening, or whilst they're in their car and they just start talking to somebody else. And I think that power to be able to tackle anything, whether it's something as simple as a bit of showbiz news to make people laugh, have some fun with a caller on the phone, or tackle an issue that actually can make a fundamental change to the way we live, is really powerful and shows what an engagement with audiences can deliver. And that leads on to some of the amazing work that you've done with commercial brands. And I think what's really powerful is how somebody can come to us and say, look, we want to do something really different, be part of something fun and engaging, as well as, get our message out there. And it's fair to say that the audience really trust you, don't they?
Yeah, you almost build a friendship with listeners and a relationship, because ultimately they're waking up and listening to you every single day. So because we reveal so much about our lives and so much about our experiences, it's almost like they're listening to a friend every single day and they know so much about us. I remember when we did our Hits Live event and we had a commercial partnership with Openreach. And I'll never forget being tasked with going out into the arena and selecting somebody at random to win an iPhone. And at one particular event, I literally had to select someone at random out of thousands in the arena. And I managed to pick a girl whose birthday it was that day. So not only was she excited to be part of our Hits Live event and to be an avid follower of our breakfast show, but we put a massive smile on her face by giving her a prize on her actual birthday, while also promoting a brand and having a really successful partnership in that way. And so it's fun to be a part of exciting relationships like that.
I think everyone's a winner when something like that happens. And I think looking around, Bauer's portfolio at the moment, we've got some amazing brands working with our breakfast shows. Absolute's partnership with Wix, who've been sponsoring that breakfast show for years now. And it's that integration with the breakfast show, because I genuinely don't think there's anything stronger than being live and of the moment, is there? And that's something an algorithm on a streaming platform just cannot create. I mean, what do you love about live radio that would work so well for a client, perhaps?
I just love the element of jeopardy in a way. There's nothing that really compares to being on air live and you're getting the action and it's in real time and it's a direct connection with whoever's listening.
I totally agree, Fleur, and I think that's what makes radio really powerful. It's that sense of community.
Our aims with the campaign at the time that we were considering who to work with were to really promote a new water theme park that we were opening, Volcano Bay. We already have a relationship with the team at Magic and we've done some successful campaigns together anyway.
Great idea, you've always got a plan.
We had content for maybe 2 to 3 months with the opportunity for the listeners to win the chance to actually fly out to Orlando and enjoy the show there.
Congratulations! Oh my God, oh my God, woohoo! Hey there, it's Harriet Scott and Ronan Keating from Magic Breakfast. We are here at Universal Studios, Florida.
Yes! And broadcasting live, having Ronan and Harriet in the park was just fantastic. Getting them to actually interact with the raptors in Jurassic Park.
Raptor!
They went on the roller coaster and sang Life is a Roller Coaster.
Oh my God! Roller coaster on a roller coaster. I mean, it's been thrown around a few times over the years at me, but I thought I'd save it for something special like this for Harriet.
Don't forget to sing, Ronan! Don't forget to sing!
I just killed me. Life is a roller coaster, just gotta ride it. Oh!
Hey, baby!
I have to say, it was one of the most entertaining moments of my career.
Over the years, Radiocentre's research has proven how a strong audio brand can boost the effectiveness of an ad campaign and increase the brand recognition. So we teamed up with audio producers Bounce to create Radiocentre's audio brand, including a sonic ident and brand song. brand has already been used in radio ads, podcasts, online videos, and even right now at Tuning In livestream. With the ever-growing possibilities presented by an innovative audio-focused future, Radiocentre plans to make the audio brand a key part of its identity for many years to come. Up next, we have Radiocentre's Insight Manager, Camilla Kamara. Camilla is responsible for delivering the research and insight function and manages Radiocentre's bespoke research. Today, she will explore the importance of a consistent audio brand.
As you will have heard earlier, audio branding is something that's very important to us as an organisation. It's something that we implement into our own advertising. But why is it so important? And how can advertisers develop their advertising to make it even more effective? Now, when we're talking about brand assets, we're talking about the non-brand name elements that trigger the brand into the memory of category buyers. So, for example, a visual brand asset might be the use of a logo or the use of a particular font, whereas an audio brand asset is referring to things like musical cues or the use of sonic triggers. We know from analysis from Ipsos that 92% of ads use distinctive visual brand assets, whereas only 8% of ads use distinctive audio brand assets. So there's very much a disparity here. We also know from Ipsos study The Power of You that distinctive audio assets make advertising much more effective, indeed more effective even than visual assets. So this presents an opportunity for advertisers to develop their audio assets and make their advertising work even harder and become even more effective. But how can brands develop effective audio brand assets? According to research from Radiocentre, consistent ads are effective ads. When we look at the top 5 creative features of effective campaigns, consistent creative ideas, musical link with TV, consistent sonic, these are all the markers of the most effective campaigns. A big reason for this is that listeners are deprived of one sense, sight, so consistent audio assets help them to understand quickly who it is they're speaking to. A great example of this is McDonald's. We often associate McDonald's with their golden arches, but we also associate them with their audio brand cues. The "I'm loving it" catchphrase and the sonic trigger that accompanies it has been around for years, and they've maintained that while still being able to keep the creative fresh and flexible and adaptable to the campaign or to the audience.
I'm loving it.
But the value of consistency extends beyond TV. So if we look at campaigns that did not include TV, consistency is still key. Consistent creative route, a consistent voice actor, consistent music, the same logic applies. So let's take a look at some examples from the travel sector.
And for such amazing value, that's Travelogical.
It's our biggest celebration ever. Thank you for flying Ryanair.
So in terms of audio branding, we know that audio brand assets are more effective than visual brand assets, but only 8% of advertising uses distinctive audio brand cues. So there's very much an opportunity here for advertisers to develop their creative further. But consistency is key. Being consistent with audio brand cues across ads and across media makes advertising much more effective.
Well, that's just about all we have time for this morning. Just before I go, I want to say a very quick thank you to Jeremy, to Jo, to Fleur and Paul, to Siobhan, Mark, Judith and Camilla for their presentations, and we hope you found it useful. If you have any questions, do get in touch. My email address should be below me now. Also, if you have any questions for Radiocentre, you can contact any of the team via the Radiocentre website, and we'd love to hear from you. Now, this was the fourth in line of a series of special tuning-ins that we've done. So far, we've looked at tuning in. We've tuned into finance, to the car market, to retail, and obviously today to the travel market. All the content will be available on our website, and if you follow us on Twitter, we'll let you know as and when these are being released. So all it leaves is for me to thank you for watching, and let's hope that we all get to go on holiday very soon. I, for one, am hoping to leave in the next couple of weeks. Thank you and goodbye.
That's all for Tuning In Travel. To find out more about Radiocentre's work or to get in touch with the team, head to radiocentre.org or follow Radiocentre on social media. Thank you for watching, and we hope to see you again at one of our real live events when it's safe to do so.